My reality is normal for me, just like yours is normal for you. Things happen that I can't explain, and I know they're real and I know they happen. And that's what's so fun about it. It doesn't necessarily measure up or match anyone else's reality. One of the first things the guides had me write down so I would remember it. You are magic. You are divine. With you, all things are possible. Hello, I'm Wendy. I hope you found in some of the shows some things that were interesting, something you could use. I am a channel, and that's a direct voice channel. In other words, I don't tune out or go somewhere else. I stay right here, and I am aware consciously of what is coming through me. Now, if I do a reading for someone, it doesn't mean that I will remember what was said. Everything is personal, it's unique, it doesn't belong to me. So when somebody comes back and said, "Can we pick up where we left off?" No, because it wasn't mine. It was just mine to share or interpret. The shows are in the archives, recent ones about consciousness, fascinating stories with Tom Dongo, Paranormal Sedona. I did two, I split that into two segments because it was an hour and a half. One is the high strangest paranormal encounters and otherworldly anomalies, part one, and then the other one, Paranormal Sedona, high strangest. Tom has been at this for several decades, and so he has a ton of information. It's hard to to narrow the focus and say what is it because there's just so much there. But being in Sedona, he's had access to some incredible events. I went to Sedona for a short time, stayed there for about 3 or 4 months, contemplating whether I should move there. And I had some incredible experiences. Mine were with animals. And I stayed in a casita, is what they call it, basically an apartment. And what was amazing to me was that the metaphysical things that happened. One was the place was haunted, or at least I had a visitor because it would turn the TV off and on. And then a picture on the wall. Was halfway asleep, halfway awake, and I heard tap, tap, tap. It was a sequence. One, two, three, four, tap, 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 tap. So and at that point, I thought, okay, I have somebody trying to connect. I didn't know what to do because it was so new for me at that point to understand how to access my ability that I just said, okay, this is enough. Please, please stop or, back off. And it did. But the information at one point, I was on my way to work. I did a short part time stint at a local radio station doing news there. And on the way to work, they told me, do not drive through the puddle. And there had been rain. And so when I saw the puddle on the road, I went around it. After I got to work, I announced that there had been an accident in that area. The puddle, it looked completely innocuous. It had washed out some of the road, and so there's no way I would have known that given a prior notice of that. I didn't have the accident. And the other thing, on the way to work, I would hear tapping, and I did actually set my tape recorder. At that time, I had a little cassette player, and I had it with me, and I would hear tapping on the way to work. So it moved from the apartment to the vehicle. I would hear tapping. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get this on, just play it so I've got it and I can prove that it's happening. So I get to work and I'm talking at some point through this and saying, well, I guess there's nothing here. I didn't hear anything. When I replayed the audio on the cassette at that time that I'm saying that, there's a very loud tapping. I couldn't hear it, but it certainly was picked up on the recording. And that's really some of these EVPs. The amazing thing about that is you don't always hear them when they come through. You might be able to hear them in the recording later if there's something worth catching. And I do have one of the shows that I recorded during my stint doing podcasting. There's a very specific recording, and it says nightlight, and I was editing the tape and happened to punch it up in one spot. I saw something on the screen and I thought, okay, this is where I would edit or cut it out, remove it. And as I went to do that, I realized it was actually saying something. And then so I amplified it and there it was, nightlight. So that's what I work with. The nightlights are interactive. Right now they're on vacation. They tend to When it first started with the interactive nightlight back in 1997, that's when I first became aware of it. And then I wrote about it in 1998, trying to get everything down before I forgot, and also being guided to write it down. I thought it would stop. I was afraid. So I would wake up and just sit and watch it. It was amazing. it was like a miracle happening that this was an interactive nightlight. And there were several places in the house where it did that. So it wasn't just one. That activity has continued, and it was trying to save the bulb, which is what I've been told. It has been at sometimes off for a couple of months, and then it'll start the activity, the interaction, blinking will continue and resume. And now it will do it at certain times. Sometimes it's a full moon. That energy seems to be different for that. But I don't control it. It does say that it is a response to my energy. So that bioelectric energy, we all have that. And it is using that as a basically an amplifier to be able to do what it does. And at first I was kind of like, okay, you're a nightlight, but at night you turn off. And this is not a nightlight when you need the light on at night. That was when it was resting. It's just like me. It was off overnight. But it also said it was again conserving the bulb. And it also I have the activity sometimes in desk lamps or overhead lights. It just depends. So it's an electrical interaction, and I find it fascinating. The fact that it's been happening since 1997 is an anomaly. There was a show, a documentary, and he was asking if I wanted to be included, but I didn't think it was respectful. I learned from Ingo Swann that the minute you invite a skeptic into the space, it can dampen the activity. I had a real time experience with that with Claude Swanson. I interviewed him. I don't have access to the interview anymore. It was on a previous. I was there for 10 years on Power Radio. Anyway, I interviewed Claude and met him in Topeka, Kansas when he came to make an appearance, and I met him at one of the local people who was helping house him at that time. I met the two of them at the house, and absolute total shutdown. I had shown him at the space where they were making the presentation. I plugged it in a wall outlet, and there it was blinking. And so when I went to the house, though, I'm aware that the person there was completely adamant that this was impossible and I was making something up or delusional. Take your pick. So it didn't happen. And I was astounded. I'm like, wow, that's the first time it's ever been shut down because I had actually taken it and demonstrated it for public events several times. And that was when I realized Ingo Swann had a point. It just takes one dedicated skeptic, a diehard skeptic, to shut something that's really unique, to shut it down. And it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with that person's frame of reality, how they see or view the world. And so there's a very strong barrier to things that will create a paradigm shift, an awakening, an opening. And I learned from that. So, just in terms of if you have these experiences and you know they're real for you, that's all that matters. You have to understand that each person creates their own view of reality. Each person determines how they will access, whether it's this dimension, the next dimension, or beyond. And that's why some people who are psychic from birth see the world differently than those who have never ever had a psychic or intuitive experience. And so it's easy for them to say, well, this is normal, this is real, this happens to me all the time, right next to the person who says, no, it isn't, this isn't real, it can't happen, that's impossible. And there are times when people will see, when I interviewed Melba, Dr. Ketchum, she's working with the gene studies on Bigfoot, trying to track some of those anomalies down, and saying at first she was skeptical, thinking, well, that couldn't happen. Then they sent her some material, and she's like, oh. And then she also has Bigfoot in her own area. So she's changed completely her idea about that. And I had my own Bigfoot encounter going to Mena, Arkansas, where they have this is a crystal mine, and you can go and dig crystals. And I was invited to go there. They'd had some paranormal experiences, and I thought basically this was to, go see, check out the crystals. So I was thrilled and I was excited about that. Then I got there and they said, "Oh, by the way, this happened overnight. We have Bigfoot in this area and Sasquatch, depending on how you reference it. Um, they're not supposed to be here." Yeah, well, they are. And they don't have to leave their area to connect with you. They can connect with you wherever you are once you've had an encounter. So it was interesting because what they showed us was probably a 2.5, 3 foot in diameter log tree that was up about 20 feet in the air that had been placed there overnight somehow. And there was another guy who was researching Bigfoot activity, Sasquatch activity in that area. He was there, so he was a witness and thrilled because this was something that nobody had an explanation for. And then I was gifted with crystals, and one I went through a space that was kind of a special area there. They call it the nursery. And so I followed Orville, one of the owners. I followed him through, and I was told to step lightly and basically, be very careful. I tried to trace Orville's tracks and put my feet in there and not veer off. And after I got through that area, I was told telepathically to pick up a rock. Now, I was having a problem with that because I thought, no, no, I'm not going to take anything from this area. This is special. I respect that. And the second time, got the same message prompt, pick up a rock. No, 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 I'm not going to. So the third time, when I'm saying no, it's pick up a rock. Okay, so at that time, and granted, I've taken several steps since I got the initial thing of pick up a rock. All right, so the third time I got the message, pick up a rock, I did. And it's about inch and a half little rock. It looked like a normal rock. I turned it over. It's lined with crystals all underneath. And it is in the shape of a foot, a small foot as opposed to Bigfoot. Anyway, I was, wow, that is so cool. And then the telepathic message was thank you. It was in recognition of me honoring what I had been requested to do, was to tread lightly in that space. And so that's the way we get a validation that what we are doing is being appreciated, and it will be validated, affirmed, rewarded, acknowledged, and nobody else gets that. Okay, it's between you and whatever this entity, this energy, this essence is. It's your interaction, it's personal. And so there's no proving that. There's just you knowing, okay, I have this information and what do I need to do with it? And you go your own way. But again, having been in the presence of people who are incredibly guarded or afraid of this kind of energy, skeptical is one word, then there will be different responses and different activities. And sometimes it will amp up just because the fear can sometimes activate or in some way thrive on the energy of fear. And then if you continue to feed the fear, then it builds, and there's a different kind of energy that works with that. If you're familiar with Jane Roberts, she wrote the Seth books, Seth Speaks, and you create your reality. That's basically what this is. You create your reality. Your reactions, your actions, your interactions, your beliefs, your thoughts, everything that you do is programming. You are programming yourself. You may have been programmed by your environment, your society that you're in, your family, your media. All these things are ways of interacting and engaging with the world. And then your belief and your response determines how that goes forward. And there's also a collective consciousness that's buying or feeding into this. And that makes its own determination. It's a lot more freeform than we have been told. And that's why certain people are able to experience miracles, to experience something that makes us question what we think reality is. And that's the fun part. Once something happens that makes you think, wow, then you can start experiencing reality. So the interactive night lights and my spirit guides, the guides that I work with, and the other things that I hear, it's part of my normal. Won't be normal for anybody else, but it's something that I experience on a regular basis. And I thought maybe I should start putting this in writing, telling stories to create another way of viewing this. So here it is, Scenes from a Sci-Fi Dream. This is also on my website, Talking to Nightlights WordPress, so you can read that there. My reality is normal for me, just like yours is normal for you. Things happen that I can't explain, and I know they're real, and I know they happen. And that's what's so fun about it. It doesn't necessarily measure up or match anyone else's reality. One of the first things the guides had me write down so I would remember it. You are magic. You are divine. With you, all things are possible. And that was a way of reminding me anything is possible. My thinking, my beliefs, my actions, my responses are a mirror reflecting what I believe and what I can buy into. So here we go, Scenes from a Sci-Fi Dream, because this kind of incorporates some of the things that I believe. In order to more fully understand this reality, we must take into account other dimensions of a broader reality. John Archibald Wheeler. He was a physicist. You can learn about him at Princeton Physics. Forgotten Truths. When Adrian Caldwell agreed to become part of a secretive military experiment, he never imagined he'd awaken forgotten memories of worlds beyond ordinary perception, or become a living bridge between humanity and mysterious beings known as the architects. But as Adrian unlocks truths hidden deep within himself, he realizes the price of remembering might be his own existence. Now, only investigative journalist Marian Kessler holds the key to recovering what was lost, if she can decipher her own fragmented memories before Adrian's name fades completely from reality. Prologue. Echoes of Forgotten Truths. Long before Adrian Caldwell sat confined within sterile walls, he'd sensed his life was a careful orchestration. His childhood dreams weren't ordinary. Vivid, immersive journeys through realms beyond waking perception, filled with beings whose faces he couldn't recall clearly, yet whose presence lingered long after waking. One particular night stood out above the rest. He remembered standing in the circle of one, an infinite space of brilliant, iridescent glow, comforting, yet overwhelming in its vastness. There Adrian held a book, the Angel Book. It seemed formed from pure thought, pages shimmering gently. It held truths beyond words, answers he didn't yet have questions for. Then he'd woken up, grasping nothing, his young heart aching with inexplicable loss. Decades passed. Adrian became part of Project Halcyon, a covert military operation exploring remote viewing. What started as an exercise in observation soon transformed. He touched again those forgotten worlds, and this time something reached back. Scene 1. The Debriefing. Adrian shivered, his hands pressing onto cold steel, fingers numb at the edges. Across from him sat Marianne Kessler. Her eyes sharp, yet cautious, the sterile light flickered as if emphasizing their tension. "You think you're here to interview me," Adrian murmured softly, eyes searching hers with weary insight. "But you're not the only one asking questions." Marianne frowned slightly, hand hovering uncertainly above the recorder. A distant chuckle whispered through the air. Unsettling, familiar, yet alien. Adrian's lips curled faintly. "See?" Scene 2. Lucky's arrival. The static in the air deepened, becoming palpable. Adrian relaxed visibly, as if greeting a familiar friend. Marianne watched closely, deeply intrigued. Adrian spoke softly, introspective. "This is Lucky. He found me." Or perhaps I found him in the spaces between what we're supposed to see. Lucky's voice emerged, warm, dryly humorous, yet wise. I'm whatever you need to understand. An emissary for the hidden. Marianne steadied herself, sensing truth hovering just beyond reach. So he isn't human? Human is a limitation, Lucky responded. I'm here because Adrian chose to see beyond that. Scene 3. Into the construct. Adrian's eyes closed, memory flooding vividly. Marianne leaned in, witnessing vulnerability behind his calm exterior. I was there, Adrian whispered. A place with no physical boundaries, carefully constructed. Multiple voices spoke simultaneously, not chaotic, but strangely harmonious. Lucky's presence sharpened, filling the space reassuringly. The construct, a testing environment created by those called architects. Architects of what? Marian asked, her voice hushed in respect. Reality itself, Adrian said, opening his eyes to hers. They shape perception, possibilities, our paths. Lucky chuckled, knowing yet kind. And Adrian was chosen long ago. Scene 4. Bishop confirms the truth. The door opened smoothly, admitting Bishop. Calm and composed, yet deeply burdened with quiet understanding, he met Adrian's eyes knowingly. I've seen the corridor, Bishop stated firmly, bypassing pretense. You're not hallucinating. The architects are real. Adrian drew a deep breath, validation steadying him. Lucky's voice murmured gently at his side. Bishop is your anchor. He's walked this road. Marianne's pen trembled slightly. Why are we all here, then? Bishop's gaze never wavered. Because the architects are preparing an awakening. Adrian nodded in acknowledgement. With his reassurance affirmed, Bishop quietly exited the room. Scene 5. The illusion of time and the unseen hand. The game was never fair. It was never meant to be. The deck was stacked, the cards marked, and the rules rewritten in invisible ink. And yet, the game could still be won, because time itself was the illusion. Chaos was a sleight of hand, the distraction meant to keep everyone looking in the wrong direction. But the ones who knew, really knew, understood that the key wasn't to outplay the game. It was to step outside of it entirely. That's where the unseen helpers came in. They weren't bound by the same rules. They watched from the higher dimensions, tracking each move, waiting for the moment when intervention was necessary. Not to hand out easy victories, but to break the script where it had been rigged, to introduce an impossible turn of events, a loophole in fate. The trick was knowing when to ask. It wouldn't come as a grand revelation, no divine proclamation, no neon sign flashing, this way to salvation. It would come as a whisper, a gut feeling, a hunch so strong it could break through doubt. And the road ahead? That was the test. Would you listen? Would you trust the unseen hand? Would you step forward, even when every logical move suggested you should fold? That was the real game. And those who learned to listen, really listen, would always have an ace up their sleeve. Scene 6. Adrian's memory awakens. Adrian shuddered softly, waves of remembrance flowing over him. He felt the angel book again, saw its pages shimmering gently in his hands within the circle of one. I chose this path. Adrian breathed quietly, realization settling deeply. I chose to forget until I was ready to remember. Lucky materialized clearly beside him, eyes compassionate. And now you're ready. Scene 7. The choice. A ripple filled the air. The architects arrived. Luminous presences of infinite depth. Their silent voices resonated inside Adrian, profoundly familiar yet awe-inspiring. You stand at the threshold. We guide gently but never command. The choice remains yours. Lucky's comforting presence strengthened beside Adrian. Your choice here echoes through every possible reality. Adrian breathed deeply, conviction rising within him. I choose understanding. I'm ready. Scene 8. Awakening. Reality snapped abruptly into sharp focus. Marianne jolted, her eyes bewildered, gripping her pen as though emerging from deep water. Something happened, she whispered softly. I can't grasp it clearly, but I know it's there. Adrian exhaled slowly. You remember enough. Behind mirrored glass, observers murmured quietly, reconsidering what they'd seen. Lucky stood solidly beside Adrian, reassuring yet solemn. You did well, Adrian. Adrian hesitated slightly, turning to Lucky. Are they ready to know? Lucky's expression held gentle regret. That's no longer yours to determine. A subtle vibration passed through the room. Marianne's confused gaze settled on Adrian briefly, uncertain. Wait, who are you again? The lights flickered. Adrian's heart tightened sharply, sudden isolation pressing in. Lucky's voice murmured gently. Every choice has its cost. You've become their forgotten truth. Marianne realized she was alone in the room. She turned her eyes downward, startled to see the notebook before her. Written repeatedly, urgently, across her notes, was a single name. Adrian. A subtle spark kindled inside her, understanding rekindled gently. She raised her eyes again, voice soft yet firm. Adrian, she whispered, feeling resonance. I will find you again. Epilogue. Echoes. Weeks later, Marianne stood quietly in her small apartment. The containment room notes spread before her. Adrian's name repeated, scribbled hurriedly yet unmistakably by her hand. Each line evoked flashes of feelings, moments just beyond conscious memory. She knew now that something extraordinary had transpired, something erased yet lingering. I will find you, she repeated gently, a vow to herself, and the truth hovering at perception's edge. In another place, beyond familiar perception, Adrian stood at the circle of one. Luminous beings surrounded him gently, compassionately. Lucky approached quietly, warmth and wisdom in his voice. You became their catalyst, Adrian. You opened the door. Adrian met his friend's steady gaze calmly. But now they don't even remember me. Lucky's eyes sparkled. Not yet, but memory is resilient. Truth always finds its way home. Below, among countless human minds, a ripple of awareness stirred gently. A quiet awakening unfolding in hearts prepared to listen. Reality had shifted irrevocably. Adrian smiled softly. He knew the architects were right. Timing was everything. And soon enough, humanity would indeed remember. So I've been writing, still working with the guides, and still getting all sorts of inspiration because it's chaotic right now. And in times of chaos, actually, the creative element increases because there are no set boundaries, no set limits. Nothing is defined. Everything is up in the air. And that's when interesting things happen. The rules change. And we're here connecting the dots. There are several recent shows on the podcast that give you an idea that there's so much going on here we don't we don't know how to even classify it, quantify it, explain it, prove it. An interview with Mark Turner. Mark talks about his multiple encounters with beings and crafts from other worlds. John Foster, his story is in the archives, and he's had experiences for decades. He's 87 and still documenting how that changed him on his blog, johnfosterufos.com. Tom Dongo, who's had incredible experiences in Sedona for decades, and one of my favorites because it is so unique, the Polaroid ghost, John Huckert, over 12,000 photographs. And the Polaroid ghost, who calls himself Wright, Wright, has written on all of these Polaroids messages. And I featured my favorite in the heading on that podcast. Anything is possible. Remember that. In order to more fully understand this reality, we must take into account other dimensions of a broader reality. John Archibald Wheeler. Thanks for listening.